We want to welcome you to our series, our CABE webinar series. Today, we have a special treat with our webinar titled Unlocking Reading Success for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Learners, Principles, Policies, Procedures, and Practices. Before we get started, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to CABE's Director of Program and Events, Delma Shalinsky-Sheridan, who will give you some important information and direction for today. Delma.
Hello, thank you so much, Dr. Lampkin. Hello and welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you joined us. My name, of course, is Delma Shalinsky-Sheridan, and I'm the Director of Programs and Events here at CABE. As we get started for today's session on how to unlock reading success for culturally and linguistically diverse learners, I have a few housekeeping matters just to share with you. As this is a webinar, the speaker and the panelist microphones will be on, they will be active, and the participant microphones will be muted. However, if you would like to pose a question, please place it in the chat. And it's the chat area below, it says chat. And our Deputy Director, Maria Villa, will share the comments later, and you will have them answered throughout the webinar here. However, keep in mind that it may not, your question may not be the one that is chosen at the time. It will be depending on how much time we have to answer. So one other thing, we will be sharing the recordings of this webinar, and it will be available on gocabe.org website within a week. For you can watch it again if you like, and if you like to share it with your colleagues, that'll be fine too. So now that we've received all this information and you now know what's going on, I'd like to send it back to our CEO, Dr. Edgar Lampkin.
Thank you so much, Delma. Now, folks, let me share with you a little bit about our presenter. Joe Guzman's journey from a Spanish-speaking child in a farm-working family to a nationally recognized advocate for emergent bilingual and multilingual learners across the U.S. is a testament to her resilience and passion for education. Growing up as a limited English speaker, Jo faced exclusion in schools due to her language, culture, and socioeconomic status. These experiences shaped her deep understanding of the challenges faced by culturally and linguistically diverse learners. Rather than viewing these differences as barriers, Jo sees them as strengths, often describing herself and her students as bilingual, biliterate, bicultural, bicognitive learners, whose unique perspectives are superpowers that enrich their education. Guided by her parents' principle of para servir, which means to serve, Jo has dedicated her life to supporting educators, students, policymakers. Through her widely respected foundation framework tools and various professional learning programs, Jo has empowered thousands of students and educators to recognize their potential in every learner, regardless of their background. Her neuroscience-based strategies and practical framework have transformed classrooms and educational policy, making her a sought-after expert and leader in the field. Jo's commitment to service and her visionary leadership continue to make a profound impact on education nationwide. On a personal and professional end, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to have Jo Guzman as my master teacher while doing my student teaching in her newcomer K-3 combination class with 32 students who spoke a total of 28 different languages. She was masterful indeed. Since then, she continues to be a mentor and truly admire and respect what she does nationwide to train teachers and help districts improve outcomes for all students in literacy and biliteracy. As we look at getting back to implementing the robust and comprehensive ELA-ELD framework that supports literacy and biliteracy, as well as the sciences of reading, her presentation, without any doubt, will provide us with all of the tools, resources, and supports that she has promised in this incredible webinar. So without further ado, Here's Joe Guzman, and as her students would say, take it away, Miss Joe. I think you're muted.
And your screen and the video.
All righty. Well, I'm waiting to get on. Ah, there we are. Well, hello, everyone. And oh, I'm so grateful the technology is working. That's always the big, oh my gosh. You have to understand that when I started teaching, got excited about colored chalk. So here we are. Well, thank you so much for attending today's webinar after a long day of work for all of us. And we've come together. Oh, I see the corazones. Oh, it's probably people that we've been together through the years. And I'd like to thank Kabe for inviting me. And Kabe and I have something in common. We're both celebrating our 50th year. And my 50th year as a lifelong educator this month. So anyone out there the same? Oh, there we go. There's a hand. Gracias. Well, let's get to it because I only have an hour and 15 minutes with you and we just have to do our absolute best here. So here we go. So everyone, here we go. So here we have the title, A Promise is a Promise, Unlocking Reading Success. Let's just take that chunk. I want you to visualize some keys. And as we know, we keep on hearing that, our kids aren't learning how to read. Well, I'm not so sure about that. How's that for a teaser? I would like to share with you some reasons why maybe they're not learning how to read, or is it they aren't, or we just are not being given the resources that we need, or the resources are there, but maybe people didn't know how to use them. So we're going to talk about principles, policies, procedures, and practices today. For who? The big group, culturally and linguistically diverse learners. So here we go. And now we want everything to work here. All right. All right, everyone say a prayer and we're gonna hope that the next slide comes back. And I don't know why we're not seeing this. So I'm gonna do a stop share for now. And then I'm gonna come back in. So everyone say a prayer. I'm gonna start all over. And here we go. So let's see if this time it takes. So here we go. Yes. Ay, gracias. All right. So we need to greet each other and just know everything that I'm teaching today, I'm using a teaching method called intentional teaching. Every slide you're going to see today is intentional. Every action, every gesture is intentional. So we need to greet each other and hint, hint, this might be one of the keys to unlocking reading success. So in the Southern Bantu language, in mainly South Africa, Zulu, the greeting would be like this. Two people would come together and one would say, Sawubona. And then they would say, Sakona, I am here. So first, I see you and I wish I could see you. Oh, I wish I could be right there with you. And then the response is, I am here, that we're making a commitment to each other. To what? And then the last part of the greeting is Ubuntu. I am what I am because who we all are. So let's connect this to our CLD students. The sequence of the greeting exchange is important. Until we see each other, we don't exist. When you see me and I see you, and I see you with your, what you're putting into, your greetings and your chat and all that, but I can't see you, but I'm going to take it into my heart, the different little icons that you're sending up and all that. So when you see me and I see you, we bring each other into existence, and we're bringing the things that I want to share with you today into existence. The other important information is we all need to be seen. And we see a lot of our children not being seen, but not just our students. As educators, many times we're not seen or heard. We need to be seen and heard and understand that we're all in the same choir. We just have different voices and we do different things. And so we're going to see how that comes into play with helping our students. How do we see our culturally and linguistically diverse learners? Our emergent bilingual, multilingual learners, EL. You know, there might be someone that says, oh, well, that's not how they're called. That's not. Well, you need to know that today, are you ready for this? We have people attending from the East Coast. We have a large group from Georgia. Hello, Georgia. I've spent so many years with you there. And in the Midwest, and so almost every time zone, and of course out here in the Pacific time zone where I am. So I've learned working with different administrators, policymakers, state departments of ed, that our terminology, everyone has different terminology. So I will be using this terminology, our EB, MLL, EL. I'm also going to be talking about ELA/reading, because I know that all of you are coming from different states and you have different State Department frameworks. And so just know that I've made an intentional decision to use a term that many of you are using in your different states. So here we go. We're all in the same choir, and I like to call our choir the Advocates for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Learners Choirs. When we sing as a choir, we come together as a group of individuals. Yes, individuals with our own unique talents and experiences. But we work as a team to create something bigger than ourselves. And as my parents would say, that my purpose in life was para servir, to be of service. So I hope that I am good service to you today. So how was your day? Well, let's honor and celebrate you. I love hearing people when they say that, oh yeah, the pandemic's over and COVID's over, but many of you are still addressing the needs of our students, faculty members, community members, that it has still left an effect on us. Education Week has done a wonderful job of having all these research articles come out in the last year, survey results of how are teachers feeling, how are administrators feeling, how are superintendents feeling out there. And there's so much that keeps on being put on our shoulders and our backs. And so let's honor and celebrate you. So right now, wherever you are, maybe you're together at school, maybe you're on your own at your favorite after school place to go get some coffee, tea, or a special beverage. Maybe you're in your car listening and watching the webinar. So what I'd like you to do right now is to celebrate one thing that you did today that you know, boy, it made a great difference in this wonderful profession called teaching. And I'm going to think about mine right now. And I'm going to say a gratitude prayer. All right, so now we go on. Now, if you're more logical, mathematical, you want to know, well, what's our goal for today? Well, here they are. Goal number 1. It's very complex out there, and some would say very complicated. That's the reality. I work with superintendents, with principals, with teachers, with specialists, and in this world called coaching. And what I found was that, forget the coaching things that I was supposed to share in the area of reading by literacy. But a lot of times they just wanted me to listen actively, not with these, but here. It's complex out there, but it's very complicated. So what I found really helps is the whole idea of simplicity. Simplicity allows the learner, adult or child, chiquito, to grasp the whole concept quickly and easily. Simplicity leads to understanding and inspires action. So my next goal for us today is a very simple way of listening to the information today. All I want you to do is to think about the following when I'm sharing an idea. I want you to think of it as, is it a keeper for you or a polisher? A keeper for me is anything that you're hearing, that you're learning, that you think, oh my gosh, I already do that. Hey, team, we already do that. Hooray. And I call this a palmadita moment. Palmadita in Spanish, right here. This is your palma, and you're giving yourself a palmadita. Little pat on the back. So the other thing is that when I'm teaching, and if you hear me say something, you go, oh my gosh, we're not doing that. Maybe that's why it's leading to our students not learning how to read in English today. That's what we're focusing in on today because we have a short time. Then you're going to collect these, write it down as a polisher, not a bad. You haven't been doing that? No, a polisher for me is, you know what? All you got to do is polish it up because even gold and silver needs to be polished and they're precious metals. Once I polish something up, guess what? It then turns into a keeper that I keep on doing it. So it's time for make it, take it. Here we go. So what I'd like you to do is to know that through the presentation, I'm going to ask you to use one of these recording activities, collection activities. And what I'd like you to do is to take at least 2 sheets of paper. So if you're with a team, look at the person that always comes with paper, never fails. They always have a nice notebook. And so ask them for 2 sheets of paper and tell them, I'll pay you back later. And then everyone else take out 2 sheets of paper. And what I'd like you to do is to take these 2 sheets of paper, fold them in half, and create a little book. So we're going to make a flip book. So with your pen, I'd like you to write keepers on one cover. Oh, I see you doing it. That's great. Do you know those of you that are doing this? Tomorrow in class, when you ask your students to do something, it's going to come right back. Oh my gosh, it's called teacher karma. When you help a fellow teacher with their teaching, it'll come right back to you. So you're going to have an awesome day tomorrow. And then flip it over, polishers. So when you're listening to me and you say, oh my gosh, that's a keeper, we got to keep on doing that. Record them, list them out. And then when you hear, oh, we're not doing that, we need to go back and talk about that during our PLC meetings, maybe during our grade level team meetings, maybe with the people you commute with. And so you'll have this. Now, I also would like you to create a foldable, a 3-2-1 foldable. So you're going to fold one sheet of paper that'll have 3 sections. And what you're going to do is now put at the very top section 3, right here 2, and the last panel here 1. Through the webinar, I want you to collect 1, 2, 3 big ideas that you're like, oh my gosh, these are big ideas, the top 3 key points in the webinar. Number 2 stands for what? 2 ideas that you're going to take back and use with your multilingual, emergent bilingual EL learners. And then down here, oh, this is the big bonus one. This is the one that you're going to write a key point, one big key point from the webinar that you know that it's so important that I'm going to take it back and share it with a policymaker or my district administrators. This is important. We need to discuss this. We need to know how can we make this happen. So you have the 3-2-1, you have your keeper and polisher, and then this one here. Hint, hint, are you seeing things you can use in your classroom? Yes, I promise to leave you with practical ideas. So it's for us today, but for you to transfer back in your classroom. So this I started using with my newcomer students, and I used to call it the learning quilt, because I found that when I was speaking in English, and this was back in 1981, my students were like, oh, it was too much. It was bombardment. It was just too much. And so I thought I have to help them capture what's coming out of my mouth. That's really important in this science lesson, this math lesson, this writing lesson, this reading lesson. And so I would have them fold a sheet of paper. So you end up with 8 boxes. And then I would say at the beginning of my lesson, all right, everyone, key point number 1. And then I would tell them, you can draw, you can write, you can, and I point maybe to my easel or something on the board over there, or some butcher paper. And I'd say, or you copy and bring it here so that I can see that you're understanding. So draw it, write it, copy it, bring it over here. Or if you saw something, you can cut it out, take your glue stick and put it there. So for you today, if you would like, you can just capture 8 key points and put them on your learning quilt. And I'll tell you through the webinar when we're going to use these, so you'll pull them out and then we'll have it. And it'll be chew time. So what do we need to do now? We need to ask a big question. So what did you bring me today? Did you bring me anything today? You were supposed to bring something today. Well, just like all of our learners, we all bring something every single day. And sometimes the gift or the gifts, no one even sees them. No one goes and unwraps them. I have spent too many times in meetings where we're unwrapping a standard, but we're not given time to unwrap this wonderful gift called, do you really know who I am? So why should we do this? It's one of the keys. Everyone who walks through our classroom door comes in with a story. So let's go to some neuroscience research. Did you know that the oldest pattern in the human brain is a pattern called story patterns? That anytime something is taught to us via a story, so here's maybe a concept you want to teach, but you embedded it in a story, the story will be the vehicle that takes it right to maybe the limbic system of your brain. It's like the emotional brain goes, oh my gosh, I love this. See the word love, and you're motivated and you're like, oh, and you want to do it. Or it's that part of the brain that has the prior knowledge hooks, the experiences. So everyone comes in with a story. I have to start out with your stories, learning your stories, and then connecting the key concepts or connecting the parts of this reading lesson that I'm supposed to try to figure out. I'm supposed to teach consonant blends, and I've got all these dittos and black line masters, and how am I going to do this? Because I have some English learners that are at maybe a composite level 3 on their English language proficiency data. What am I going to do? So our job as teachers is to learn and appreciate each person's story. I can't see you, but I think I'm feeling you. I think it's time to take out your keeper and polish your journal. With what I said right now, a negative person would just say, story. But neuroscientists would say it's the oldest pattern in the human brain. And if you want someone to learn something for, are you ready for this? Long-term memory, then you must identify what it is that you want to teach, a concept, a skill, and embed it into a story. The story is what the brain remembers, and then the concept comes. So go ahead and open up your journal and write down one keeper that of anything that I've said so far, that for some people they go, this has nothing to do with reading. Yes, it has to do with language. Listening, speaking, writing, reading, this thing called ELA, this thing called reading, and it's so big. My goal, my personal professional goal as a teacher is knowing that my job is to take care of other people's children. And I did for many, many years in my own classroom. And then was asked to teach at Cal State Sacramento, and I was there for 20 years teaching reading courses and reading methods with the great Dr. Barbara Schmidt. She and I were a team. And you know what? My commitment was to make sure that in my classroom with chiquitos, and chiquitos are pre-K or K-12, and I've taught every single grade level, that I taught them how to read so they would be literate. A person that learns to read and loves reading and is like me, loves to go to bookstores, loves hanging out in bookstores, loves ordering books. Oh my gosh, I'm reading books. Oh, and on vacation, there's the big bag and I take the books. Oh, my commitment was to make sure that I wasn't teaching you how to read and you would read and then you become illiterate. A person that learned how to read but chooses not to read. So, Keeper, it's about the stories. It's about learning their stories. And then this is the foundation of our brain, and that limbic system just starts firing, and information goes to the executive part of the brain where, oh my gosh, the big concepts and ideas. Thank you, Dr. Leslie Hart out there that I trained under you. Thank you, all the other neuroscientists that have shared so much information with me in all the trainings I would go to and sit there going, oh my gosh, how do you do this on Monday? But then little by little, it was explained to me and I'm sharing it with you. Now, yeah, write one polisher. Is there anything that I said that you think, oh, I don't do that? Or, gosh, I haven't done that in a long time because, man, they keep on telling me that I only have to focus here, but I need to bring that back. So go ahead and do that. Now, anytime that we are looking for information and stories that I could hook into my ELA reading, lessons that come as a kit, as a program that really doesn't connect to our students, I need to make sure that I can infuse their stories. So that's why we must make a commitment here, a commitment to sharing time with each other, that our districts create time for us to, hey, how about going through a student's cumulative file? I conduct EL program reviews and audits, and I'm old school. When we're moving along and all they want to show me is data, spreadsheets, numbers, and I say, I'd really like the stories instead, or I'd like to start out with your students' stories. Well, here's the data. Well, I have found that the best place to start is a cumulative file. There are so many things that teachers felt and knew that they needed to put in that file. There's legal papers in there that explain why this child may be responding a certain way, or information in there that I'm thinking, I could use this and connect it over here, like port of entry for many of our our identified refugee children. Point of entry, that meant you went here, or how many refugee camps you've been at. I'm going to find photos. I'm going to find something online where I can point to it and you can say, oh yes, Miss Joe, me here. And oh my gosh. And then those that are at a higher level of language, in their own native language and in the new language, they will be able to tell me so much, and off we go. So please, if you don't mind, I'd like to share quickly a way of learning everyone's stories. Many of you know that for a wonderful reading lesson, you go to photos. And this is my mama y mi papa, my terroir. I grew up on a big cattle ranch, and then also it had farming on this big cattle ranch. So it was cattle and farming, and it was hops, tomatoes, and corn, and all sorts of different crops. It's all about the soil, but it's not just the soil, it's everything around it that creates a terroir. The mist in the morning air, the dryness, the topsoil, the whatever little critters are flying around or in the soil that create your story out in that field. So my terroir, my story, leads to my foundation and my purpose. And these experiences inform my message, methods, and materials. This is where it began for my father, in a little shack with no water, no running water, no heat, no electricity. He was brought to the United States by contractors, and these contractors go to Mexico and then they say, oh, we have work for you here. And so they told my dad, who was at the time 10 years old, that there was work up north. Well, my dad honestly thought it was northern Mexico, but let's just say that the big trucks that had everyone in there, they kept on going farther north, and here they were in fields. And so my father worked in the fields in Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, and all over, and then California. And then he finally ended up getting a job in Slough House, California, and on this big turkey farm. And they gave him a job and they told him that he could, live there. And this was and my dad called it the cabin, because he would hear people talking about that they had cabins up in Lake Tahoe. So my dad say, sí, yo tengo un cabin. And so there it is. And so, but now it's all, it's just come apart, but it's still there on the same property. So this is where it all began. This is my papa, who died recently. And my papa loved to read. He taught himself how to read in English because he knew how to read in Spanish. So there's that transfer of, if you know how to read in your native language, in comes this new language, and it facilitates the process. And he always loved reading any textbook series that I had created, any books that I created. And so there he is reading my Access program. And he especially loved the history textbook. And this is little Dominic, and he's just a joy, and he loves reading. So he's literate, and he's always asking for books. And excuse the living room, it's a bit of a mess, but you know how it is on Christmas Eve for us. It's like everything goes flying everywhere. So what I'd like you to do is I would like you to take your journal again. Oh, I thought this was going to be a workshop on reading. Or is what I showed you anything that has to do with language and reading? So go ahead and record your thoughts in your keepers and polishers journal. All right, so at this point, what I would like to do is to share that I may have been invited to share what I know after 50 plus years. I started out as a bilingual reading education instructional assistant in one of the first bilingual education schools in the state of California at McKee Elementary on Halverson Drive in Elk Grove, California. And I ended up working for Pat Martinez, who, you never know how life works, who her husband was the very first director of bilingual education at our California State Department of Education, Gil Martinez. And in her classroom, she just walked on water, and I wanted to be a teacher like her. I became a bilingual education teacher. I went through the best teacher training education school at Cal State Sacramento. And I was in the first group that received this brand new credential called the Bilingual Education Cross-Cultural Specialist credential, K-12. And you know what? I was ready. So I went out, and my first jobs were I was a bilingual ed teacher. And then they must have had a meeting up there and up in heaven. And they said, this one down here is coasting. She's just coasting. She's well-trained in a bilingual Spanish-English classroom. I think we need to give her a challenge. And sure enough, I was then asked and invited to go to the neighboring district, where all of a sudden in the city of Sacramento, there was something called refugee relocation, and didn't really inform the district. And so they had all these new children right after the Vietnam War, so refugee relocation, and they had to create something, a program, something that we ended up creating one of the first newcomer schools, not a newcomer program, not a newcomer little specialist room, but a whole K-8 school, where I had in the mail gotten a book on something called super learning, and it was on the neurosciences. And I started trying some things out in my classroom with all of these students, where Dr. Lemkin was one of my student teachers, who from the get-go, he was an outstanding teacher. He walked on water. And I remember telling him, we just got to get the paperwork done and the course done, because you are a natural born teacher. And so there we were, applying everything we were learning about the brain. But you know what? They told me that I was a good teacher in my bilingual ed classrooms, but then that first week at newcomer school, 20 some odd different languages, different dialects. I did not, and not one Spanish speaking kid on my class list at all. 35 plus kids. What does that do? Well, one day I just was devastated. And I went home, and all the way home, I was crying in the car. And then at home, I put on the TV and I thought, I'm just going to lay on the couch. And it's one of those evenings when someone asks you, what's for dinner? And your answer is cereal. That's all I can offer you tonight. So something happened on TV. There was a logo and it was CBS. And then it said that there was going to be a CBS special that evening at 8 p.m. And then they said what it was. And I thought, this is going to cheer me up. Oh, I love that this is going to be on at 8 p.m. It came on, and I'm watching this show where it's a show about these children, their friends, they hang out. And each one has little quirky personalities, and they're just real cute. And then they have a dog, and the dog's brilliant. Oh my gosh. And then in the next scene, these kids go to school and they're in their classroom. And all of a sudden, I hear the teacher, and the teacher is teaching. And there we are. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I am Charlie Brown's teacher in this classroom. No wonder my newcomer students are just like, they can understand me. And there it was. So how many of you out there, so go ahead and send me a little thumbs up or something that says, I understand what you're talking about. So when you're given curriculum that now, oh, there they are, yay! There we are. When you're given curriculum that says that now I'm supposed to teach the alphabetic principles, 6-syllable types, diagraph, diphthongs, vowel pairs, consonant clusters, morphology, and it's like, I'm really trying to figure this out. So what I'd like you to do right now is I want you to just think, why would we tap into stories? I know that I sound like Charlie Brown's teacher in some of my classrooms, high school teacher, chemistry teacher, a teacher in the 1st grade, the 4th grade. I mean, what am I to do? Well, always know this, that maybe we're looking at the wrong data. Where do I begin? It begins with relationship, community building, honor and share your stories, their stories. Stories are data with a soul. I love this quote from Dr. Brené Brown. Stories are data with a soul. So let's look at what story's playing out there right now. And it's a big story. It's reading education in America right now. So I'm going to do something that the brain it wants a framework sometimes. It wants something that says, how can I put all this information together? So if this, and then we'll move it into then this. But first, if this. Reading education in America from the beginning of time. It's about politics, and the politics move to the policies, and then it goes into programs. So look at how 1, 2, and 3 are in there, and they're all kind of moving around. And then who gets it now? We do as teachers. Now you're supposed to teach reading this way. But 5 years ago, they told me that I had to do it the other way. And then we do the pendulum swing. And then people say that it's a reading war, and then say, no, it's not a war. And la misma cosa, the same thing keeps on happening. I will tell you this, that if we're mindful of the politics, be mindful, but it's the policies that have been there from the beginning of time for our multilingual learners that will guide us. So make sure you understand what these policies are. So here we go. I even want to slip in something there. I'd like us to have a different mindset for reading instruction in America right now, especially for our multilingual emergent bilinguals. I'd like us to maybe go to some therapy first. This is a principle in psychology, but I'm connecting it to big data. Big data is extremely large data sets that may be analyzed computationally to reveal patterns, trends, and associations, especially relating to human behavior and interactions. So I'd like to put this out there. We have not been given the time to take the groups that others say, well, test data shows that they are not learning how to read. Their scores are really, really low. Okay, so I have the test data. What I need to look at is what created that. So we need time to look at what programs were being used. What were the reading initiatives at the time when this child was in that mix with practice? And we were using programs that maybe were not developed for them, that no one was addressing biliteracy, that no one was addressing English language development in the reading program. So if our past creates our present, then we really need to look at, all right, so take your reading data, take student groups, maybe by grade level. It would be really good to start with high school students, back it up into the system, as an accountant would say, and ask the question, what reading initiatives surrounded this child, each one of these grade levels? What reading programs were we using that may have created that test data? So it's my 50th year as an educator, so I'd like to share the following, my guiding principles for doing EL program reviews and ELA reading and ELD alignment. I want to look at everything when I'm with a district. And for those of you in Georgia, maybe I was in your district, because some of the districts would, the State Department would ask me, can you go and work with this group? And we would really dig in there, and in Arkansas and in other states. So here we go. This is a guiding principle for me. If you take this guiding principle back to your districts, to your organizations, to your agencies, it will give you new eyes. The student determines how the new policy, program, protocol, procedure, and process will be implemented. One of my former students is a special education teacher. She is very clear about, if this child in their files and in their IEP says that this child is, and then there's the designation and what services they're going to provide, the student determines if this child can maybe participate in this environment. Do we need to create accommodations? What do we need to do? Or, or should we differentiate the instruction, the environment, what we're putting in front of them? So with our English learners, our multilingual learners, the student determines how the new policy, the new program, the new reading initiative will be implemented. Everyone take a deep breath. I will stand firm and strong on that. We need to look at our English learners, multilingual learners, our emergent bilinguals data, their English language proficiency data, to influence and inform what we're going to do in reading instruction. We need to look at their sociocultural data to influence and inform instruction, their bicognition data, their linguistic, native and new language data, all of it. Oh my gosh, yes. And here's another one of my guiding principles. The onus for English language proficiency growth and reading achievement is not on the multilingual learner, our emergent bilingual, biliterate learner. No, the onus is on the system. And if the pandemic taught us anything, is that many times the system didn't have in place what was needed so that their instruction wasn't interrupted. I don't believe that there's learning loss. I grew up in a family that if you had to be home and it was a school day, there was no learning loss because now I got to make tortillas with my family, and then you're measuring all sorts of things. And then I was actually pulled out of school for 2 months because my mom went in and had my little brother, but there were complications. So she was in and out of the hospital. So I was 7 years old. And I was taking care of a baby at home. Guess what? I learned how to make formula. Not now that it's just, comes in and you just pour it. No, the dextrose maltose, and you had to mix it. You had to sterilize the glass bottles and all that. So we need to look at our standards and go into the environment, into the context of our children, and collect, well, did you lose any learning, or wait a minute, I have my standards here, my reading, what I'm supposed to teach in reading, and are you doing it out here? Oh my gosh, you are. And record and collect, and then see how you can bring stories from that context back into the classroom context. Someone out there, I know it, you're going to go back and share some of these things, and someone's going to go, oh, they're going to do this. Ugh. And you know what? Probably one of those creepy little bugs. Have you ever seen those yubbits? Yubbits. Oh, they're just creepy. And sometimes they get into the ear, and then, people can't hear you when you're sharing ideas. And, they're in the pocket, and then they crawl up and they get into our ears when something new or something that can really help is coming into you. And in there it says, yeah, but. No, yeah, but bugs. No, we're going to go into how can we take these principles and bring them back, and would it create a new way of looking at everything? So here we go. ELP assessments. I tried to get as many as I could on this slide, but I know that some of your states that were on the list are not represented, but here we are. The onus is not on the English learner. The onus is on the system. Did you know that when you do EL program reviews, I was doing a review with, and in this case, I was in the state of Minnesota, with someone from their state department, and they were having a data retreat, master at data interpretation. He was able to walk around the room to all these different school districts, and they had all their spreadsheets and they had them on the laptops. He could go around and go, oh, yeah, that has to do with curriculum. That has to do with you're not using, he could look at something and go, yep, that had to do with the curriculum, not the correct reading program, not the correct this, or you're not using this. So ELP data shines a light on the curriculum materials and instructional models that have not been effective for ML, multilingual, emergent bilingual EL. Do we need to differentiate? Do we need to come in with interventions, scaffolds, remediation, or elimination? Sometimes we just have to purge out what was never developed for our English learners, our emergent bilinguals, our culturally and linguistically diverse students. So here's the next slide, and then we're going to think about some things, maybe get together, maybe do some chat. One of the questions that I had in your flyer for this webinar was, what are the factors that facilitate and the roadblocks that inhibit emergent bilingual students from learning how to read in their new language, and in this case, English? Roadblocks, something that blocks progress or prevents accomplishment. I think I've shared some things with you. And then what is in the system that, when allowed to do what it needs to do, makes things easier and possible? So you have a choice of either your keeper and polisher, or maybe you're ready to write 3 big ideas so far, or 1 big idea, 2 ideas you can take back with your students, and maybe 1 that you think, we need to talk to some policymakers about this. So I am grateful that after a long day, you've come up to this point in the webinar. And so now I'm going to ask Maria, is there anything in the chat that you could share, or maybe there's a question in there about this first section of the webinar?
Yes, a
right.
big highlight that I want to share that I captured was from Tanya, and she just wants you to know that she loves that question. What reading initiatives surrounded this child and impacted the data.
Mhm.
That was something that I was like, so true. Another one, a question is, what do you recommend as a course of action when the educators do not agree with an administrative mandate that is preventing ELs from receiving the appropriate reading intervention?
Well, you know what? You just moved us into the next section. So I will answer your question. And what I'm going to do first is, I'm one of those that I keep things because someone's going to say, oh, that's not true. And the onus is on me to prove in print that it is. So give me a little bit. I'm going to go back to some of my teaching materials. So hold on.
Great. And as you do that, Joe, I just want to share this comment. I think it's by Claudia. It says, all that data comes through if open to listen to what kids will openly share about themselves and their experience.
Yes. And it's all there if we go there. If we go into their context to learn, instead of reading some book on, like in my case, Mexicans or Mexican Americans or Hmong people, is that eventually the community and the familia or the sponsor in many cases of our refugee children, that now there's about, I think, 52 different categories of quote refugee, that when we're invited in, then you look around and you go, I didn't know this. And that's what we should be feeling every single second. I didn't know this. I didn't know this. And learn more from the original sources. So yes. So for the first person, I think it was, my big message is stop telling me that I didn't teach my students how to read. I taught them how to read. My intention every day was to come in and teach all of my children how to read. Boy, and my my reading professor was the great Dr. Barbara Schmidt. She wrote 5 different reading programs, a complete textbook series. I mean, they were awesome. And Dr. Maurice Poe. And I mean, they were awesome, beautiful. Well, she was that teacher that would make you sit up straight and you better do your work in her classroom. But if you did, she would be right there supporting you for the rest of your life. Dr. Barbara Schmidt conducted a study in my newcomer classroom, and I was at newcomer school for 10 years, where she would come back, observe, and look at reading data. And she found that every single school year, I taught my newcomer students how to read. But it had to do with, I was trained in biliteracy. Thank you, Cal State Sacramento. Thank you, Dr. Dwayne Campbell. Thank you, Dr. Barbara Schmidt. Thank you, Dr. Jan Cross. Thank you, Dr. Marai. Thank you, Dr. Maurice Poe, that they taught us about Dr. Louise Moll's work too, on culturally responsive teaching and all these different things. And to learn about the culture by being there, but also teaching us something called parallel architecture, that if I'm going to teach this language English, I better learn about their language. How does it work? And how is the brain going to, is it going to work like this? It's going to just dovetail because it's, Espanol and English, Latin script. So I could see the letters and I knew what they were. But I have to tell you, as a child, I always was concerned about my first grade teacher. And the reason I was very concerned about Mrs. Moulton was that I would look at her alphabet up here above the chalkboard. And I always would think, ay, la señora Moulton se le olvidaron unas letras. Oh, poor Mrs. Moulton, she forgot some letters. Because I knew it as A, B, C, Che, De, and then, where's the ñ? Where's the eye? Where's the... So as a teacher, I need to learn more about the first language so that I know, does it just go like this? Or is it gonna, kind of constantly trying to figure out, are there diphthongs over here? And we need to be given time. So that is why I think we need to invest our money on taking student groups by grade levels. So let's start with the high school kids. Back it up in the system. Stop saying that they, have low reading scores. Instead, look at what the intervention was basically. What was the reading initiative at the time that created this? What were the programs that were purchased that created this? It isn't them. It's what people say to us. No, you need to buy this, this, and this. Now, there was a reading initiative, and I keep this, and this isn't pointing the fingers at any administration or any politics or what's your political party, none of that. But I kept this because it was like, oh, 2008, an Education Week journal, newspaper, where the findings came out about reading first and that it wasn't working and it didn't work with our English learners. It was an initiative. And then materials were created to match up with this. But it wasn't created with any of our culturally and linguistically diverse kids in mind. So back it up into the system. And we need to be the voice for those that have not been given a voice. So I'm going to give you some ways of taking care of this. So here we go. I hear a lot about foundational skills. Yes, necessary. But I need to learn about the foundational skills in this child's language. And how does it align, or the parallel architecture? What do I need to do? What do I need to learn? And so here we go. Foundation is one thing, but did you know that when you build a house, and I was very, very fortunate to be part of something called Rural California Housing, which was for farm working families to be able to own a home, but you had to build the home yourself. So every day after school and very late into the evening after my dad came home from work, we would drive an hour and a half down to the building site. You were assigned a contractor and carpenter, and you had to take the class of the evening. So if it was framing, then you needed to learn about how the house was going to be framed. If it was electrical wiring, then you had to learn how to pull in all those wires and where. If it was sheetrock, and I have to tell you, I was pretty good at sheetrock. And insulation, couldn't stand that lesson because it was when it had fiberglass. Oh, it's just, I hated that one. And so, but you were there with your familias and everyone had to work on this. I'm here to tell you that the majority of the time in building, and in this case, a home, is spent on the infrastructure, not the foundation, the infrastructure. So let's look at the infrastructure that is there for our English learners. I hear a lot about the sciences right now. For our EL students, here are the sciences that protect and empower our multilingual learners. So here we go. How can the sciences serve as a foundation for Lau versus Nichols, Castañeda versus Picard, and the California ELA, ELD frameworks be used daily to influence and inform effective reading instruction for our CLD, super diverse, multilingual, emergent bilingual learners? Well, here you go. The science of demography is what comes first. Why? Because everyone pretend you're knocking on a door. So I'm going to knock over here. Oh, there's someone at that teacher's door. Okay, so the teacher opens the door and then someone says to them, oh, I have a new student for you. And this is Saifang Li or Chi Kwang or Jose or Mariqueta or whoever. And then they say, oh, and by the way, Miss Joe, this child speaks Zapotec, Chinoteca, Hmong, Mien, Lao, Punjab, Mandarin, whatever the language is. And then they hand you the paperwork, they give you this child, and then they take off. And then from a distance say, and oh, by the way, they don't speak English. Okay. So how did you know that they spoke Hmong? Well, the science of demography is what the home language survey is all about. It is to collect the story of what language did you speak first? What language does your family speak at home, or do you speak the most? And those wonderful, wonderful questions. But you know what? It's depressing. When I do a NEAL program review, a lot of times administrators and teachers haven't been taught how to use that information to influence and inform reading instruction. And that's my area, reading instruction by literacy. And so we need to go back and look at that. And you know how it works. If there's a language other than English, then ding, 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 then it triggers the system to say, we must administer assessments, a screener, and then later a progress. And that brings in the science of psychometrics. So I have to look at that home language survey, and many states are calling it something else, but you know what I'm talking about. So you're going to take that now as data, and you're going to say, oh my gosh, we need to learn more about Zapotec, or we need to learn more about this. Oh, we didn't know about this. That's what blocked me. And I was a reading specialist when I started working at newcomer school, and I didn't know anything about Hmong. I didn't know that there were color coded languages. I didn't know about Mien. I didn't know about Lao. Oh my gosh. And that's why I kept on making mistakes in how I was teaching my students how to read. And so the more you learn about their language, use the science of demography, the information in the home language survey, use the science of psychometrics. There's a reason for the English language proficiency assessments. States pay millions of dollars for these assessments, and we need to use the data. And then this one, oh, I love this one. The science of jurisprudence, the laws that are there that protect our emergent bilinguals. Lau versus Nichols, Castañeda versus Picard. I use these as my pillars, and people go, oh, those are old. No, they are there for a purpose. So let's look at these with new eyes. So as you know, and you do have a link to some of my key point slides. You don't have all of my teaching slides, but you have some of the slides that you have access to. So Lau versus Nichols, and there were the Lau remedies, and it says exactly what we needed to do. And I go back to the years of when some of these things were being developed. And because I worked for a teacher that her husband was a director of bilingual education at the State Department, I mean, I was hearing this all the time, and how they were used to help with instruction, not compliance. It was how to help me in the classroom. So look at these laws with new eyes. Look at how they empower me to be a really wonderful reading teacher. This one is my all-time favorite. So here we go. So you probably see that I'm very, use a lot of hand gestures and body language, and it's all those years of working with kids that don't speak English, so doesn't get you anywhere. So here we go. Castañeda versus Picard gave us what's called the 3-part test. So I want us to go back to that research, and they're telling me that these students haven't learned how to read. And you didn't teach them how to read. So we now need to do this. No, we need to look at what was the context, the political, the policy context at the time, that now we're buying these programs that were not developed for these children, and now we're just using them on these kids. So here we go. 3-part test says, number 1, informed by an educational theory recognized as sound by some experts in the field of what? Growing corn, in the field of podiatry? No, in the field of the student. Remember, the student determines how the new policy is implemented. So in the field of biliteracy, translanguaging, in the field of language acquisition, anything that applies to this student that is now in my care. Well, we got a program and we're looking at it, we go, well, no, but it's okay, we're gonna buy it. So then we have it, where you have to use it. And now look at the second part of the test. The program and practices actually used by the school system are reasonably calculated to implement effectively the educational theory. Well, they're not reasonably calculated because they were built on the educational theory that is for the student. But by golly, I'm still going to do it. And what's happening now is we're taking all sorts of tools out of my tool belt that would help me with addressing the needs of all the different languages and all the different language proficiency levels and all the different ways of reading for my students. And then number 3, this one's a hoot. The school program succeeds after a legitimate trial in producing results. Well, that program didn't produce results. So now what do? Oh, darn, man. It's them. The family, the student, whatever. So we have a saying in Spanish, un dedo, a dedo is here, a finger, un dedo para allá. Tres dedos para acá. We point one finger that way. We got to watch it because 3 fingers are pointing right back at me. So I need to look at, so it's not the teacher, it's not the student, it's not the family, it's not their culture, it's not. And I've lived through those pointing fingers when I was a student. No, my mom had taught me how to read in Spanish by the time I went to school, but no one knew. They just thought I couldn't read in English, that I was struggling. But you know what? It was all those challenges that led me to my purpose in life, in my professional life. So here we go. What I want to do is to share with you, this is a concern of mine right now, a big concern. There is a purpose for core, intervention, and supplemental reading materials. There is, and for all the other folks out there, I'm in the state of California. I was born here, I grew up here. Very lengthy, in-depth processes for adopting curriculum materials. And, it takes 2 years to develop a framework. So the ELA, ELD framework now, that is a gem that all of you out there should just go on our California Department of Ed and look at it and see what you can pull out of there. And oh my gosh, it's a wealth of information. And back in my day, let me see where this one is. Okay. It started out, and we must give credit where credit is due. It started way back in the 80s, and we had a English language arts framework. It was like a starting point. Integrate the language arts, literature-based. Oh my gosh, stories. Oh, and now we know it's the oldest pattern in the brain for teaching and learning. If you are using a multiple tier response system called RTI or RTII, see, we're an RTII state. We're not an RTI state. Response to intervention, listen, response to intervention first. Some folks looked at it and said, wait a minute, it's not about the intervention or interventions, more of those. It's about response to instruction and then intervention. So let's support the teachers and the administrators with everything we've got to address the needs of their very diverse student populations. So when you look at tier 1, that's where core comes in. Core is the full buffet. And there's a lot of people that want to get rid of core reading programs. They're saying that because that core reading programs did not teach children how to read. Well, here's why they may not have worked, because many times school districts did not buy everything that was supposed to be part of that core reading program. So you cannot say you were, implementing to fidelity. So now there's a push for only intervention programs. Well, those are not for core, they are specialized, and I will use them at tier 2. And there's going to be someone there, my bilingual, biliteracy specialist, my ELD specialist, the classroom teacher, literacy specialist. We're all working together. Hopefully, yes, I know, we're still hoping that all these folks are given the time to do all that at tier 2. And then we have the supplementals, the other special things that we can add on. And this is kind of like dessert. And we have all these other special things. So we need to really look at what's happening out there. We need the core at tier 1. that has everything. The foundational skills are in those programs. And the legacy publishers, I have to tell you, they go through rigorous process of redoing and editing and changing and everything so that it matches the needs of each state. So think about that. So now what I want to do is just show you this slide. Let's put it all together. So we differentiate by, number one, we screen. So there's that whole language survey. That's data. So this comes from the science of jurisprudence because it came from the law remedies. And we're collecting information that is sent to our state departments, and then the State Department sends it to our US Department of Ed to look at languages and to look at, and then we go into the assessments. We look at English language proficiency data. And then we use jurisprudence, the science of jurisprudence, demography, and psychometrics to move you into program placement and ELD programs. The core reading programs, the really good publishers out there, are legacy publishers. They made sure they were inspired to include in their core reading programs your designated and integrated ELD, so that a teacher didn't have to like, okay, now I got to do this and that. It was embedded so that the ELD specialist could work in tier 1 with the teacher during reading time. And it was all there. And we had the authentic literature that we could use, the class sets and all that. And then the science of jurisprudence and demography and psychometrics. There it is again for reclassifying and monitoring. So here we go. This one from the neurosciences. I'm so excited because in November, every year for now some 20 plus years, every year in November, I go to the big scientist conference. And so this is one thing that I learned way back that I want to share with you. So as we're wrapping up here we go. A neuroscientist, someone's talked about, well, struggling this and struggling readers and, kids that aren't learning. And he said this, and I wish, I could find the name because I just took notes. I was in a session that was really full, but he said, when someone is struggling to learn, simply, and then he did this, change the energy. And I thought, whoa, and we all kind of went like this. And he said, change the materials. Change the context, learn more about their culture, learn more about their language. And I thought, oh my gosh, simply change the energy. And now this falls under neuroplasticity research. So I love this. Dr. Max, as he's referred to, Canadian Brain Development Research Chair, he always says neurons that fire together, wire together. So we want to learn everything there is to know in their language, in their culture, in their context, their experiences, and then put it together with what I'm wanting to teach you, what I have to teach you, what I want to teach you in all the content areas, in ELA, reading, writing, all the domains of language. But when they're struggling, it's simply because neurons out of sync fail to link. So when I'm using a reading curriculum that doesn't give me the big picture, doesn't connect to my prior experiences, then that's why we as teachers struggle. And those are the days we get in our car and just want to go home and cry. So as I wrap up, I want to show you something. Do I dare? Do I dare? Well, here it is. I'm old. I'm gonna dare. We've all seen this, the pillars. But in all my years of working with culturally and linguistically diverse learners, my own students, working with teachers in their classrooms, then you know what? We have to understand that sometimes we just have to change the sequence of events. And here's something that I want to leave you with. So should we differentiate the 5 pillars by using our emergent bilingual learners, sociocultural, native, and ELP by cognition and academic data? And I see a typo there. Ah, caught it. Should I integrate phonemic awareness and phonics into comprehension, vocabulary, and fluency instruction first? Maybe, and here's why. Because I served a US president as a education advisor and my area, and I was at newcomer school, and I don't know to this day who recommended me. But I've always loved reading reports. I don't know. I'm a teacher. What can I say? So here's an if this. The National Reading Panel report, here's the history. When the panel issued its report, the chapters were presented in the following order: phonemic awareness, phonics, oral reading fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Some observers interpreted that to imply a sequence of instruction, which is not the case. In fact, the National Reading Panel did not provide either explicitly or implicitly any information about the order or organization of instruction. And the source is right there. So for any of you that want to read it on your own, get your hands in there, print it out for everyone, then let's do that. It gets better and better, folks. The National Reading Panel, given the enormity of the task before it, made a conscious decision not, and I repeat, not to include the scientific literature available in the development of language and literacy for those students learning to read in English for whom English was not their first language. And I provide the source for you. This one, this was a couple years ago. I was attending a webinar and I heard this. I didn't know there was a second reading panel report, the 2006 National Literacy Panel. And I thought, we have such a high number of CLD, EL, multilingual, emergent bilingual. We need to take all of the data, all the information, all the reports, everything to help us so that we can be the teachers that we all know we can be, know we want to be, to make sure we create literate children that love reading just like I do and just like you do. So let's wrap it up here. Today, to teach, I was trying to give you information with a teaching process that I created back at newcomer school, and it's chunk and chew. So you take a chunk of info, a visual, something. You provide the verbal input integrated in there. You give some sort of a visual, be it the slide or my body language or whatever. But I only have about 11 to 17 minutes because the brain can only process auditory input for 11 to 17 minutes. And then it's time to chew. And this is where I would say, I want you to think about or visualize this. Or in the classroom, I'm going to give them 5 to 15 minutes to process the chunk that I just delivered. And do you know why I created Chunk and Chew? It's when I realized I was Charlie Brown's teacher. Oh my gosh, I can't do this to my kiddos. And so I have the Chunk and Chew in your handout that I gave you. And then the other thing, when I would ask you to, can you see it, see your students, see yourself back in or whatever scenario. Did you know that comprehension, reading comprehension, has very little to do with what level of comprehension question you're asking? Neuroscientists have always said it has very little to do with that. It has everything to do with the big V. When the person is speaking or reading to you, can you visualize? Comprehension has to do with, can you visualize? But if I sound like Charlie Brown's teacher, or if I'm using materials where the stories, I don't know what this means. I've never been there. I can read in English, but I still can't visualize this. So in some of my textbook series, we always have, sections in the instructional format, what's on your mind? So the student will write in their draw what's on their mind so that I, the teacher, can go around the classroom and see what they're drawing to see if they are thinking about what I'm teaching. Or sometimes you see something and you go, I don't know what this is, but they will explain it to you, and it's a connection that they have that they now share with you. So everyone take a deep breath. It's time to make it official and to go. So here we are. In my family, my mama was known for her refried beans. Nobody makes refried beans like my mama. She had several little secrets. And I remember that I would come home and I'd say, ay, ama, I made your refried beans y nunca me salen como usted. They never come out like you make them. And then one day my mama said, ay, mija, te falta buena mano. And buena mano is this belief that everyone has that special touch, the gift for something, building something, growing something, right? And so then she took my hands, she says, pon las manos así. So everyone out there, put your hands out like this. Well, I've always, my whole lifetime has been language and literacy and biliteracy. And so I believe that because my teacher education, my experience at the first bilingual school in the state of California, and Pat Martinez, who I was her assistant for 7 years, and the team there, that I was given buena mano. So my mom said, mira. So then my mom put her hands on my hands. She rubbed my hands and she said, buena mano, te la paso. So then she rubbed my hands and she said, I'm going to rub my special touch on to your hands. And then you say, buena mano, te la paso. And then they do this. So they send it to you, but to your heart. So I hope that I was of service to you. I wish I had a full day with you because there's so much to share. Many of the slides I didn't even get to, but I guess these were the key points I was supposed to share. So buena mano, te la paso. So thank you so much for being with us today. And now I'm going to pass it back to my CAVE colleagues who are going to wrap everything up for us and tell us what to do next.
My goodness. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for this very informative session. We do have Dr. Barbara Flores and Dr. Jill Kerper-Mora that would like to do a real quick reflection. If we can turn it over to you, Dr. Flores, Dr. Mora.
Yes, thank you so much, Joe. That was just incredible. I have lots of insights from you, but I just want to maybe make some key points that you brought forth. And I just love the way that you organized the session and how it was interactive and really, went to our hearts. And I'll start with the last point, one of the last points that you made, which is really key, that the National Reading Panel did not provide either explicitly or implicitly any information about the order or organization of instruction. And the fact that you said the oldest pattern in the human brain is the story pattern. And my experience as a teacher and a teacher educator and working with children is that we have to not only know our kids' stories, our teacher stories, but also start with story. Start with story that's meaningful to our children. And then move to what you said, making visible the parts that the kids need to learn to become proficiently, readers and writers. And that is very, very key. I just love that. And, the neuroscience research would help us in that and that needs to be at the forefront. And,
Yes.
and then I also liked your guiding, teaching, learning principles that we start with a student. We should always start with our students, and they should be the ones that determine what policy and program and protocol, procedure and process that we use. We're the teachers.
Yes,
the ones that know the students. We're
yes,
the ones that have to deal with our students. And no policy or no program teaches. Teachers teach. And,
yeah,
and that's what's very key. And in terms of another policy or another insight guiding principle that you said uh, was the English language proficiency assessment. Based on that, it's the differentiation, our interventions, our scaffolds, our, I would add enrichment.
yes,
Add
yes.
enrichment
Uh-huh.
we need to do in our small groups, and also get rid of the stuff that doesn't work, eliminate it. And because we know what works, teachers know.
Mhm.
If we don't, we will find out. I mean, all the resources you gave us, oh my God, incredible. And I think we need to, go to those and spend time, do study groups with each other,
Yes.
and just begin to take charge. Us teachers take charge of what we know, or look for what works, and begin to find people that will help us do it. The last thing that I thought, that insight that was just incredible, was the sciences of demography, psychometrics, jurisprudence, and also the sciences that we know about how kids learn, the teaching
Yes.
learning theories that we know that currently are dismissed, currently
Uh-huh.
dismissed and not made visible. They're trying to make us think that we're crazy and we don't know what we're doing, but it's not
Yes.
true. It's not true. And so I just applaud you. I just love your manner, your manera de presentar. And it's just so amazing. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias a ustedes. Para servir.
And by the way, I got my master's under Barbara.
Oh, oh, oh,
My master's in reading under Barbara.
oh, Barbara. She's
Anyway,
up in heaven.
I now pass it on to Jill. Go ahead, Jill.
Oh, this has been amazing, Joe. It's just a wonderful presentation, and you've given us so much. And I want to start with your very first slide. You gave us the 4 Ps: principles, policies, procedures, and practices. But you also gave us the 4 Cs: culture, context, content, and contact.
Yes.
And I want to emphasize how those 4 C's are totally affirmed by our knowledge base for teaching multilingual learners. For example, culture, all of the research on sociocultural elements in teaching and how those make connections with, as you say, the storytelling. And we know from the neuroscience that storytelling is the basis for reading and for all learning.
Yes.
And then in terms of the context, that cultural context, and also the context of learning about different subjects and learning the language, you've got that all woven together. And one of the concepts that is foundational to our teaching is comprehensible input. So
Yes.
you told us how to give that context to the language through multimodal, like pointing to the to the chart on the wall or whatever, all the different modalities for making connections with students so that they're observing, they're drawing, they're writing, they're using that input in a way that's totally contextualized. And then, of course, the contact, the warmth and the love and the caring that you give to those students and to your student teacher practitioners and all of the people you come in contact with. It's just such a blessing to our profession. And I thank you so much for your wisdom and your loving, charitable approach. Te paso la mano. And now I pass it back to Edgar.
Thank you
I have
again.
a book. Everyone must read this book. Solito.
Uh-huh.
Gracias. Well, thank you again, Dr. Jill Kerper-Mora, and thank you again, Joe. If you are interested in learning more, you can all go to the links that were placed in the chat for you. Please know that CABE is bringing you this webinar as part of a series of webinars with experts who are well-versed in effective reading and writing instruction for super diverse multilingual learners and emergent bilingual learners. Thank you again, Joe Guzman, for answering all of the questions in the flyer and for providing such valuable information and practical ways to address the 5 pillars to unlock reading success for culturally and linguistically diverse learners. The recording of this webinar will be posted on the website, gocabe.org. Look for it in the coming week. And now, if I can have Delma close us with some announcements. Delma.
Oh, yes, thank you, Dr. Lampkin. Wow, what a wonderful, wonderful webinar. We do hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed that presentation and you have walked away with informed and reinforced perspective to go back to the classroom and wherever you might go out. Here are some announcements that we have. We do have our CABE 2025 annual conference that will be at Long Beach Convention Center and the surrounding hotels on March 26th through 29th. Please keep a lookout. Go to cabe2025.org as we constantly update that website. We also have a few other virtual events that are going on. We have our CABE Dual Language Teacher Academy program that is virtually on Saturday, September 2024 through May 2025. These are from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. There's a little, if you can see a QR code there, you can scan it and get more information or to register. If you would like, if you don't or you're not able to scan it, go to gocabe.org and you can get that information from our website. We also have our CABE English Language Development Teacher Academy, which is also a virtual series. That's on Thursday, started in September and will end in May from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And as you can see, we have a QR code there as well. Once again, if you'd like more information, go to gocabe.org and we update that website regularly and you'll see the new and what's happening event going on. And remember, if you're not a CABE member, do so as soon as possible. So, until next time, you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. And I look forward to seeing you guys very, very soon.
Awesome. Big thank you to the entire CABE staff. A big hug to you, Jojo. And we are checking out.
Good night.